Right, as you know, the crazy hard-left Marxists are coming after everything. We've talked about this a lot on our channel. They're going after brands and these capitalist corporations who are also giving in. That's why we changed the name of the movement to Virtual Signals Matters, VSM. Yesterday, it was all about the Premier League. Premier League came back. Football is back, but in a very political way. The players had to kneel before the game. The players had to have the NHS logo on their kits. They also, at the back, they changed the name of all the players to this. I know. So today we have a special guest with us to talk about all this. It's the editor-in-chief of the National Pulse, Raheem Kassam, one of the top British commentators based in the US. So let's go to Raheem and see what on earth is going on. Right, so now we're with Raheem. Hello, Raheem. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Maya. Thanks for having me.
So what is going on? You guys in America have exported something we didn't want after Halloween, obviously. And with this whole BLM movement, it's taken over the media, academia, capitalist corporations, so-called capitalist corporations, and now the political system, the Tory government. What's happening?
Yeah, but just like our friend Dan Jukes in the pub, Britain has said to America, "Hold my beer," and appears to be doing the riots in a much bigger and better and definitely more prolonged way than has happened here in the US. It has certainly quieted down this side of the pond, and there are major cleanup efforts here in Washington, D.C. and in other cities. But of course, we had, and I say, just down the road from me, in fact, my corner store was looted that Sunday night when all of it went down. It started on the Saturday. I went out Saturday morning, took a load of pictures downtown outside the White House and showed the level of destruction. But also, I've been doing this a long time, Maya, and what I saw was a very clearly coordinated effort, not by ordinary black people in Washington, D.C. who were there trying to protest that, although there were those, but an Antifa organized, centrally organized rioting, looting downtown in Washington, D.C. And you can tell this sort of stuff by the types of graffiti that is left around. You get a lot of anarchy signs and all sorts of other things. Eat the rich, for instance. And of course, nowadays, all the rich are very skinny and rakish, so they wouldn't be very tasty to eat anyway. But this is the sort of thing we've looked for and we found. Now we're in a sort of situation where, the president, he's recently signed this executive order about police reform, and now I think people across on both sides of the aisle, the normal level-headed people, are trying to find a way to peace on the back of all of this.
But I think that's a point, because these certain radical hard-left movements have existed in America. Like, you got the radical feminists, you got these guys, you got obviously the extinction people. And it's been regular for the past few years, and specifically like things like BLM, it seems to be new to this country, to the UK-ish, in terms of publicity. Do you think the reason that, for example, the Tory government and Boris Johnson's cabinet have been weak, apart from the fact that they have been weak on a number of other issues anyway, do you think it's primarily because they're just not used to it, a politically correct way of seeing that, okay, we could say Black Lives Matter movement is good, but not the organization? And my problem is both. It's the movement and the organization.
Yeah, look, I mean, on the back of the killing of George Floyd, we all came out and said, of course, Black Lives Matter in the same way that all lives matter. There's no distinction. There's no hierarchy. There's no second-tier citizen, of course. And the killing of George Floyd was obviously abhorrent and disgusting, and the perpetrators of it should get what's coming to them from a judicial perspective. But then it transfigured into something else. And of course, I don't need to teach you guys about this, but the Black Lives Matter movement in the United Kingdom is not some community-based groundswell. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Socialist Worker Party. They have a private limited company. These great anti-capitalists, they have a private limited company in the United Kingdom. I think it's called the Stop Trump Coalition UK or something like that. And what's worse about all of this is you see the players, the same players over and over again, whether it's the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which is trying to take down conservative websites in the United States for things that they publish, whether it's the Hope Not Hate organization, whether it's the British Future organization, which gets money from the Open Society foundations and so on and so forth. These players are not just trying to ruin the United Kingdom, and they are also trying to then push that back over the Atlantic and impact a presidential election. So I spoke to Congressman Paul Gosar earlier this week, and he tells me that he's going to be approaching Attorney General Bill Barr to make sure that there is an investigation into the tech firms and into the organizations in the United Kingdom which are actually guilty here of foreign collusion. That's one part of it. The second part of your question is, why is the Tory government so bad? Well, you know, back in the day, 2010, I sat there on the balcony of the old county hall with David Cameron and launched the general election campaign. I was a young Tory. But in 2011 and through the coalition government, I saw the light, jumped ship to UKIP, and this, you know the old story from there. The Conservative Party has no interest in conserving. People need to get that into their heads, and people need to revoke the democratic mandate that the Conservative Party has. Boris Johnson is a cultural Marxist, the same way that almost every single person in the Conservative Party is, and I will not back away from this as well. His girlfriend, Carrie Simmons, who used to knock on my window down on Matthew Parker Street every morning, is a cultural Marxist.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that they're definitely wet. They're definitely liberal, and not in a good way. Liberal, I mean, as if there is, they are essentially pro big government in a social way, and actually they're not even conserving the cultural and social values of the Western values, Judeo-Christian values. I agree in that sense. I wouldn't really call them cultural Marxists, but. But
they're cultural Marxists, Maya, because they are allowing this to happen. So they're either passive cultural Marxists or they're active cultural Marxists, but they're at least cultural Marxists.
Yep.
And here's the thing we have to understand. We used to think of the Conservative Party as the high ground of conservatism, as the high ground of Toryism, as the high ground of preserving something in the United Kingdom. We now know the party is not interested in doing that at all. It has shown no cojones throughout this whole process whatsoever, and it is about time that somebody comes along with a big stick and says, you're done.
Yeah, and to be fair, the one thing I've noticed, I remember when you used to be part of the young Tories back then, there were a lot of young Tories who were careerists, and they didn't care about any of like actual values. I can assure you, it's worse now. the younger generation that I've met, they're the ones that literally 10 minutes ago they had the hashtag I'm with May, and then 2 minutes later back Boris. They don't care. So it's the same thing. This is the problem with the party long term as well, unless they do something about it properly, which is kind of difficult. I think they have to go through a proper crisis until they reform, because they've been winning technically since 2010.
A full electoral crisis is what they need. A full, complete electoral meltdown is what the Conservative Party needs. And you know what? Just like Enoch Powell said ahead of that 1970 election, he said, you know what? The Labour Party, you can deal with them for a short amount of time, then kick them out. But the Conservative Party needs root and branch reform before I'll ever trust them again.
Yeah, and on the other side, when it comes to President Trump, obviously until when this BLM stuff started, he was getting a lot of, obviously, again, typical attacks from the CNN and the mainstream media saying, oh, you're not handling the current crisis properly. And I think that the way we look at things from this side is that what the crazy Marxists have done probably helped Trump now for the re-election. Do you think that actually his chances are slightly getting better again?
There are two ways of thinking about this. One is let these Democrat cities, because it is mostly Democrat-run cities where this is taking place, if not exclusively Democrat cities where this is taking place, let them burn. Let the governors and the mayors of these states and cities show the electorate ahead of an election what will happen if the Democrat Party takes over. That's one theory. The other theory is, however, this is happening on President Trump's watch, and whether it's a pandemic with very high death numbers here in the United States, even though those death numbers are mostly in Democratic states, where the Democrat governors put old people into nursing homes when they had the coronavirus, and it therefore killed more old people. It's still playing out under a Trump presidency, and the riots are still playing out under a Trump presidency. So people are trying to figure out which one of those, electoral strategies works best. I happen to believe that it is about time. Now, the public have had a chance to see what's going on in the Chaz or the CHOP or whatever you want to call it there, that autonomous zone in Seattle. They've had a chance to see that. It's internalized. It's not going away. You'll be able to remind them of it in videos going into the election. It's time for President Trump to step in and say, right, there's their alternative. Now I'm going to show you what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, you mentioned Chaz. For people who don't know, that basically the left-wing anarchists have taken over territory, and they made it like an independent state for some reason. What's the update on that? Is that still going on? Or?
Chaz is still a supposedly independent, autonomous state of the United States. And if there's one thing I can tell your audience is that you have to watch Tucker Carlson's opening monologues every day on Fox News. It's just about the only Fox News show that matters anymore. The rest of Fox News might as well be CNN, apart from Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham as well. But that's the evening section. The daytime, the Fox News coverage has been dreadful, to the point where Fox News said it was mostly peaceful in the Chaz. You have a warlord with an AK-47 handing out AR-15s to kids on the street from the back of his Tesla at night in this autonomous zone in downtown Seattle, by the way. This is where Frasier, remember, was based. Downtown Seattle, and the mayor calls it the summer of love. And the governor, Democratic governor Jay Inslee, said, "Oh, I didn't even know this was happening."
It's absolutely chaotic, but I think you're right. They could go so far that eventually, firstly, they could eat themselves as usual, and also ordinary people out there will actually see their true face behind all this niceness and compassion, all the things that they hide behind, which is, about time. The last thing I was going to ask, because obviously you're close to the whole Washington stuff and the White House, the story just came out about Bolton, the former advisor to the national security, and he's written a book and he said he made some comments against President Trump, and now both sides are clashing. What's the update on that?
Look, I know John Bolton personally. I used to interview him every week on my old radio show. I've sat down with him before. We've run into each other in green rooms before. And John Bolton is on the record as having said that when he thinks national security is at risk, he's willing to lie to the public about it. And that's what he's doing here. He's lying to the public about what happened with President Trump. We've already seen U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer come out and say, well, hold on, I was there during these China meetings. Those stories aren't true. John Bolton's making it up. He's got a little sobriquet over the last couple of months. The sobriquet is hashtag book deal Bolton. He got a big book deal. In the United States, you can get $1 million, $2 million for writing a book. So he writes this book. He puts things in there that are manifest nonsense, by the way, that Trump didn't know the United Kingdom was a nuclear power. Well, I was told by a very senior former White House source this morning, you can probably guess who it is. I host a radio show with Steve Bannon every morning, that Trump and Steve actually discussed Britain's nuclear capabilities very early on in the administration. So it's a complete nonsense. It's a complete falsehood. And Bolton's being Bolton. You can find this clip, by the way, on Twitter. It's on YouTube. John Bolton lies. He admits that when what he thinks is America's national security interest, which is, by the way, his opinion, right? There's no objective national security interest. When his opinion is at risk, when his warmongering ways are at threat, he's willing to lie to the public. And that's all this is.
That's really interesting, yeah, because obviously from here, the mainstream media in the UK, they're not really talking about that.
Why would you even watch it? The only news outlet I watch from the United Kingdom is the Maya Tousi show.
Thank you very much. When are you going to be in London? Anytime soon?
Never.
Well, yeah, we technically send you into exile because you off everybody.
Listen, I still piss everybody off from 3,500 miles away. I still have 180-odd thousand Brits on my Facebook page, and the Facebook fact checkers are coming after me day in and day out. So I have not abandoned the fight over there. And you can bet your bottom dollar, as soon as the coronavirus restrictions are released and I could fly back and forth easily, because right now if I flew to London I couldn't fly back to the US because the ban is still in place. But you can bet your bottom dollar that as soon as those restrictions are lifted, I'm going to be over there causing merry hell. Me and you, Maya, we're going to hold a rally in Parliament Square around the Churchill statue. We'll get the Spitfire flying overhead. How about that?
Brilliant. Well, I'm not paying for that, but let's see how it goes. Thank you again for thanks again for coming on the show. Hopefully see you soon.
All right. Cheers.